I lost my job. The first thing my sister said was about her car payment. My parents had already started packing up my room before I could even sit down. I had never brought up the company in my name or the beach house. By morning, their entire world had quietly collapsed. Who's going to cover my car loan now? That's what my sister said. Not, are you all right? Not what happened, just my car loan. I had been laid off for exactly 90 minutes, and that was the first sentence anyone in my family said to my face. I'm Joanna Sinclair. I'm 34, and by the time I drove to my parents' house that evening to tell them in person, they already knew. My father was already boxing up my bedroom. Let me go back, because it took 15 years to create the kind of family that could do that to me in under an hour. For 15 years, I had been the family bank, not a metaphor. A real, monthly, automatic financial operation with one depositor and 3 withdrawal points. I had been paying my parents' mortgage, $400 a month on time every month since I was 22 years old and 3 months into my first serious finance position. I took over my father's health insurance premium after his hours were reduced at the plant 8 years ago, $780 a month, a figure I know as well as other people know their own birthday. I even co-signed my younger sister Megan's car loan 2 years earlier, after 2 full weeks of my mother's silent treatment showed me, more clearly than any talk ever could, exactly what saying no would cost in that house. Over 15 years, by my own careful calculations, I had sent home roughly $340,000. No one ever kept a record. No one ever not once said thank you. I don't mention this for sympathy. I mention it because it is the precise, measurable form of what happened to me, and numbers, unlike emotions, cannot be debated later. What nobody in that house knew, because nobody in that house had ever asked me a single question that didn't end with a dollar figure tied to someone else's need, was what I had done with the rest of my life. 6 years ago, I quietly co-founded a financial advisory firm with a business partner named Greg Ashcroft, someone I had met at a conference and trusted enough to risk a second mortgage on. Real clients, real income, expanding every year. An entire professional life built in the hours after I hung up with my mother that not one person in my family had ever asked me about. For years I told myself that the silence about my own life was simply how my family worked. Private, reserved, not very talkative. I told myself that the checks I sent home were just what a responsible daughter did. The way you convince yourself of many things when the other option is admitting you've been quietly draining yourself for over a decade and calling it love. 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday, I was laid off. 60 employees, company-wide changes, a severance package, and a box for my desk things. The whole process finished in about 40 minutes. The specific harsh efficiency of corporate restructuring in a company that had, until that morning, called me a top performer. I drove straight to my parents' house afterward, still wearing my work blazer, to tell them in person before they heard it another way. I remember thinking on the drive there that I actually wanted some comfort. I hadn't wanted comfort from that house in longer than I could remember, and a small, stubborn part of me hoped this might finally be the moment that changed. I walked in and Megan was already at the kitchen table, phone in hand. So it's true you got fired, she said, not looking up. Then, to our mother, as if I weren't standing 4 feet away. Who's going to pay my car loan now? My mother set down her teacup with the deliberate calm of someone who had already decided how the meeting would end. Joanna, sit down, we need to talk. They already knew. I realized that in the same moment I realized the second part. They had known for hours, apparently, and had spent that time not calling me, not texting me, but sitting at that kitchen table eating lemon squares and treating my unemployment like a budget item on a shared spreadsheet, before I had even finished clearing my desk. Megan needs a proper room, my mother said, as if this were the logical next sentence after hearing about my job loss. You're barely here anyway. It makes more sense for her to have yours. I walked down the hall toward my old bedroom on legs that didn't feel entirely mine. Half my bookshelf was already cleared. My college graduation photo, the only picture of me hanging anywhere in that house, in a house covered with photos of Megan, was gone. Just a bare nail where it used to be. A small pale rectangle on the wall where the frame had protected the paint for 11 years. My father walked past me in the hallway carrying a cardboard box already half full. Shirts, a jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother. My old ceramic coffee mug, the one with the chip in the handle I'd had since college. Dad, look at me. He didn't. Your sister needs this house more than you do, Joanna, he said, still walking, still packing. You'll be fine, you're always fine. 4 words, 15 years, summarized. Joanna pays the mortgage. She's fine. Joanna gets laid off and removed from her childhood bedroom the same afternoon. She's fine. I carried both boxes to my car myself. No one followed me outside. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before I even started the engine, staring at my parents' front door, waiting for it to open, for someone to come out and say they were sorry. That this had gone too far, that of course I could stay. The door stayed closed. I drove to a gas station 2 miles away and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I called Greg. The Austin office, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Is there room for me? There was. Greg had been talking about expanding our advisory practice into Texas for over a year, and I had always found reasons to say, not yet. Not now, some quiet excuse linked to a family duty I had never fully explained to him. This time I didn't give myself an excuse. 2 weeks later, I was 3 states away, running the Austin branch of my own company, sleeping in a corporate short-term rental with exactly 4 boxes of belongings. The automatic payments were still quietly pulling $3,830 a month out of my personal checking account into a house that had, less than a month earlier, removed the only photograph of me it had ever displayed. I want to be honest about why I didn't stop them right away. 15 years of automatic loyalty doesn't turn off just because your legs finally carry you out the door. Some old, exhausted part of me kept thinking, even in Austin, even on a rented mattress, that maybe this was temporary, that maybe someone would call and things would be different. On day 16, Megan finally called, not to check on me, not to ask where I had gone. "So my car insurance is due next week," she said, without even a hello. "Can you handle it? Do you know where I'm right now?" I asked. A pause, the particular pause of someone searching a mental list that had never needed to store my address. "I don't know, Nashville." "Somewhere, I'm in Austin, Texas," I said. "I've been gone 2 weeks." "Okay, cool," she said, completely unbothered. "So about the insurance," that was the moment. Not the boxes on the front lawn, not the bare nail on the wall where my only photograph used to hang. This, my own sister. Told I had moved across 3 state lines, responding with a follow-up question about her car insurance. As though I were a customer service line she had been placed on hold with. I opened my laptop that night in the rented apartment and wrote an email with no emotion in it at all. No accusations, no explanation. I wrote it the way I write client termination letters. Clean. Factual, final. Effective May 1st, I will be discontinuing the following recurring payments. Mortgage assistance, $2,400 a month. Health insurance premium, $780 a month. Auto loan payment, $650 a month. This provides 30 days notice to make other arrangements. I CC'd all 3 of them, my mother, my father, and Megan, on the same email, so there would be no later version where one of them claimed they hadn't known. Or where the request quietly got passed along, softened, or blamed on someone else. I signed it with my full name. Not Love, not your daughter, just Joanna Sinclair. Then I closed the laptop and slept 7 straight hours for the first time in longer than I could remember. By 7 a.m., I had 14 missed calls from my mother, 6 from my sister, 2 from my father, and 26 messages waiting across 3 inboxes and a voicemail. Not one of them said sorry. I read every single message standing in my kitchenette with coffee going cold in my hand, reviewing them the way I review a client's spending history. Not with anger, exactly. More with a strange, clinical curiosity about what 15 years of extraction actually sounds like once the extraction stops. Then I set the phone face down on the counter, made a second cup of coffee, and let May 1st arrive exactly as scheduled. 6 weeks later, my mother found out I owned a company. Not from me, but from a Facebook post about our Austin office opening that a mutual acquaintance shared into her church group chat. According to my Aunt Carla, the one relative who had kept a careful, sympathetic line of contact with me through all of this, my mother read the post out loud at the kitchen table. Her face went white, then red, then completely still. That night at dinner, she said 4 words to my father that Aunt Carla later repeated to me, word for word over the phone. "We're going to Austin." I didn't invite them. I found out the hard way in the middle of my company's grand opening event, when the front door of our new office swung open and 50 guests, clients, local business contacts. A reporter from the Austin Business Journal covering the expansion watched my mother walk straight across my own office floor toward me, my father trailing a half-step behind her. I want to describe what happened next carefully, because it's the part of this story that stopped being just a family matter and became something with actual, verifiable consequences. My mother reached me near the drinks table, in front of at least a dozen people close enough to hear every word. "Joanna," she said loud enough to carry, "how could you just abandon your family and hide this from us?" I kept my voice level, the way I had learned to during 6 years of client meetings. Where staying calm was the entire job. "I didn't hide anything, Mom. Nobody ever asked. We're your parents," my father said. "You owe us." That word landed differently in a room full of my actual clients than it ever had in that kitchen back home. I saw a few polite, uncomfortable glances exchanged near the bar. "I've paid this family $340,000 over 15 years, I said, quietly enough that it stayed between the 4 or 5 people standing closest. Though I knew it wouldn't stay contained for long in a room like that. "I don't owe anyone anything else." My mother's composure, the one she had walked in with, started to crack in stages, first indignant, then wounded then. When neither of those got the reaction she wanted, sharp. "You always thought you were better than this family," she said. "Sitting on all this money while your sister struggles." It was Greg, my business partner, who stepped in at that point, not aggressively. Just with the calm authority of someone who had built a company, on knowing exactly when a conversation needed a professional third party. "I think this might be better continued privately," he said, guiding them with practiced ease toward the small conference room off the main floor. My office manager, a sharp, unflappable woman named Denise Ockefer, quietly pulled me aside once the 3 of us, my parents and I, were behind the conference room's glass wall. Visible but not audible to the party still going on outside. "Joanna, whatever you need," she said. "I've already told the reporter this is a private family matter off the record, and I've got the office's security footage running, just so there's a record." Given how this walked in, that single sentence told me everything about how the scene had already looked from the outside, before I'd said a word. Inside the conference room, my father tried a different approach, softer, the kind of tone he used to use when I was small and he wanted something. "Joanna, sweetheart, we didn't come here to fight. We came because we miss you. You came because Mom saw a Facebook post," I said. He didn't argue that. That, more than anything, told me I was right. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. My mother, unable to hold the wounded tone for long, pivoted back to numbers, which had always been the family's true native language. "You have all this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the glass walls, the office, the 50 guests visible through them. "And you can't spare a fraction of it for your own sister's car payment?" I pulled a printed document out of my bag. I had brought it on instinct, half expecting some version of this conversation the moment Aunt Carla told me they were driving down. It was a full accounting I had prepared weeks earlier with the help of an actual forensic accountant I'd hired through my own firm's network, Rachel Byun, CPA, CFE, specifically because I suspected. Correctly, it would eventually matter to have the number bulletproof, rather than just remembered. Here's the actual total, I said, sliding it across the table. $340,000, itemized month by month, going back 15 years. Mortgage payments, insurance premiums, the car loan I co-signed for Megan, which, by the way, means my credit is still legally tied to a loan I no longer control payments on, since I'm not the one driving that car. My father's face changed as he scanned the page. Not shame, exactly, more the specific shock of seeing an abstraction turned concrete. I also want to mention, I added, that co-signing without a formal agreement means Megan missing a payment doesn't just hurt her credit, it hurts mine. Rachel flagged that as a real liability risk, given that nobody made a payment on time in the 6 weeks since I stopped covering it. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. There was, for the first time in the entire conversation, nothing readily available in her usual script for this specific fact. I'm not the family bank anymore, I told them, and I said it plainly without raising my voice, the way you state a policy rather than a punishment. I built something real on my own, in the hours nobody in that house ever asked me a single question about. I'm proud of it. I'm not going to apologize for having it, and I'm not going to fund a household that packed my bedroom into boxes before I'd even lost my job for an hour. So that's it, my mother said. You're just done with us. I'm done being your bank, I said. Those are different things, Mom. If you want a relationship with me that isn't about a monthly transfer, I'm open to that. I'd actually like that. But it starts with someone in this family asking me a real question about my life instead of my bank balance. My father, quiet for a long moment, finally said something I hadn't expected. The mortgage is 2 months behind, he admitted, his voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. We don't know what we're going to do. I felt something complicated move through me. Not triumph and not quite the old automatic guilt either, something new and uncomfortable in between. I can give you the contact information for a housing counselor, I said. There are legitimate assistance programs for exactly this situation. I'll help you find the resources. I won't be the resource myself. Not anymore. They left the conference room without much more said. Denise walked them out through a side exit, away from the remaining guests, with the same quiet professionalism she brought to everything else that night. The mortgage on my parents' house did fall behind. According to Aunt Carla, they eventually worked out a loan modification through a HUD-approved housing counselor I'd pointed them toward. A longer process than what my $2,400 a month had been quietly smoothing over for years, but a real sustainable one that didn't run through me. Megan's car was repossessed 4 months after I sent that final email, a fact I learned not from her, but from the same church group chat that had originally exposed my company to my mother. Small-town circuits apparently running in both directions. She's since been making payments on a much older, much cheaper car she bought outright, with cash from a retail job. The first job, as far as I know, she's held longer than 4 months in over a decade. My relationship with my parents remains 6 months later, distant and uneven. Occasional calls, mostly initiated by my father, who has slowly started asking questions about my actual life that have nothing to do with money. My mother and I have spoken twice since the grand opening. Both times brief, both times careful, both times ending without resolution, but also notably without another request for cash. Rachel Byun's forensic accounting, as it turned out, mattered beyond that one conference room conversation. I used the same documentation, 6 weeks later, to formally remove my name from Megan's original auto loan through a hardship refinance process. The lender offered once presented with the full payment history. Finally severing the last piece of financial exposure I hadn't realized was still quietly attached to me. The Austin office has grown to 11 employees. Greg and I opened a third location this spring in Denver, and I flew out for the ribbon cutting with a strange, settled kind of pride I don't think I would have recognized in myself a year earlier. Pride that didn't come with an automatic, reflexive urge to minimize it the moment I felt it. I hung my college graduation photo in my new office, the same one that had disappeared off my parents' hallway wall the day I lost my job. It sits on a shelf behind my desk now, next to a photo of the Austin team on opening night, and it doesn't feel like a wound anymore when I look at it. It feels more like a marker, the last photograph of me that anyone else decided where to hang. Aunt Carla still calls every few weeks, and she's the one who told me gently a few months ago that my mother had started telling people at church that I was doing so well for myself these days. A sentence, Carla pointed out, that had never once in 34 years been said about me, while I was actually the one paying for everyone else's roof. I didn't need the apology to feel like it landed correctly. I just needed, finally, for the math to stop running only one direction. They spent 15 years asking me for money, and never once asking how I was. Now, for the first time, the silence runs the other way, and it's the quietest, most peaceful thing I've ever paid for.